Cottweiler, welcome to SHOWstudio.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Oh no, pleasure to have you. First question, it's a difficult question I think to answer yourself, but you know, there's a lot of hype around what you guys do, there's a lot of buzz, you've got a real fan base, there's excitement. Why? Why do people engage with your work?
I think a lot of what we do outside of making clothes is sort of about creating a kind of visual, which we've been working on, it's quite a natural thing between me and Ben. But I guess it's sort of about relaying some kind of message or a particular feel, a particular vibe, and I feel like it's quite universal and people connect to it. There's an element of mystery behind it as well, so I feel like people maybe want to know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, that mystery thing's interesting. When I was kind of researching you guys, it's kind of hard to find specific information.
Yeah.
And I wonder, has that been quite deliberate?
Yeah, we've never really spoke too much about what we do. Like, we keep it quite quiet and we don't really do interviews and stuff. So,
it's an honour.
We just kind of let sort of like Matt was saying, the imagery that we create kind of just like explain the brand and sort of show what the brand's about.
Yeah. It's interesting, a lot of designers who I interview here, particularly kind of your generation, so younger designers, I noticed it start with someone like J.W. Anderson, and kind of since then, is they don't refer to themselves as designers, they talk about being creative directors, and they sort of see things much more in that way. Is that how you guys see yourselves?
Yeah, I think our titles are that, like, as within the business, but yeah, I think the design's an element of it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right. I think when we we met at university, at fashion college, and so we were studying, making clothes and stuff like this. So, from that respect, we do call ourselves designers. But I think, I think there's so many things involved, and I know a lot of people kind of say the same thing, but about sort of relaying this kind of look, which involves everything from the clothes down to all the visuals, the lighting when we do our presentations, everything is incredibly specific. And it is really about a mood, it's about an emotion, it's about a feeling, and that's what we try and kind of evoke out of people as well. We don't like it to be too cut and dry, although we're quite technical with our clothing. Yeah. We like to offset that with something that's a little bit more of a human touch, I guess.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm intrigued because I think because of the immediate silhouette of what you make, people refer to it as kind of sportswear, and they often lump you in the same category with other London designers who are doing a similar kind of silhouette. So someone like a Nazir or an Astrid Anderson.
Yeah.
I'm interested, who do you guys see as your peers?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I think in terms of following, I guess these guys that you just mentioned, kind of we have the similar following and similar fan base. But I guess we see ourselves more of like an early, more designer brand. We don't see ourselves as a sportswear or streetwear brand. That's the thing. Although we use sportswear influences, but we also use tailoring influences as well. But we never get called tailoring. Do you know what I mean? So it's a hard one.
I think as youngsters, both of us, we have very different backgrounds, but both of us really looked up to and inspired, and were really interested by luxury and about these big kind of Paris fashion houses and stuff, which when we were younger seemed so a million miles away, and it was something that really fascinated us, I think, from a young age, just flicking through magazines, I think as we kind of got a little bit older, and me from a young age, I was really into Kim Jones. He was a huge inspiration to me, and in a similar way, I guess he took elements of sportswear but presented it in a totally different way. And I don't think many people really referred to what Kim did as sportswear. I feel in a way, someone like Kim, like Raf, huge fan of Raf from a very young age, both of us were. And then on top of that, I guess, like I was saying about these kind of big Paris brands, even women's wear brands and stuff like this, when Prada were doing their campaigns in the 90s, it was always really, really exciting for us to look at something that was this just huge fantasy world, I guess.
So is that the kind of career, it's interesting you mentioned Kim, because obviously, Kim started with his own label and then obviously Dunhill, but now, heads up men's for Louis Vuitton, it's kind of as luxury as you can get. Is that the kind of career trajectory you guys see yourselves having?
Yeah, we think so.
Always. We were once told, I think it was about 2 years ago, and someone had seen something that we did, was just a small presentation, and they were like, yeah, it's really great, but I just can't see it working in Paris. And for me and Ben, that was like, right, that's it. Like, we've always wanted to show in Paris, and we've always wanted to kind of experience that side of fashion, and we feel like everything's doable because we back each other up, and so it's definitely something that we are aiming towards. Yeah.
I want to we've talked a bit about the present, but I want to go back, and you mentioned that you had very different backgrounds. Tell me a bit about your backgrounds. I know you don't like talking about this.
I grew up in Bristol, very working class background, very sort of, moving from sort of houses into council houses and growing up on sort of those sort of, not estates in sort of the London sense of the word, as in tower blocks, but, sort of still like semi-detached housing estates. Yeah, and just kind of growing up with friends that are all, good at their trades and do, plumbing, bricklaying, carpentry. So for me to go to art college was a bit of maybe different because I was the only one who'd done that out of my friends. Yeah, that's kind of my background.
And were you creative as a child?
Yeah, I've always been very arty, if that's the word. My dad's very arty, so I get it from him.
Is he? What kind of stuff does he do?
Well, he was a graphic designer when he left school, and then he's done a lot of arty things.
And were you interested in fashion?
Yeah, but not in the. I think that's where me and Matt differ a little bit. I think my interest was probably a little bit more laddie. So I was very like into labels, your Stone Islands and Burberrys and stuff, and kind of that sort of terrace culture. And then that I sort of graduated from that a bit and was very moddy for a long time. Scooters and suits and shit. Yeah.
Are there pictures?
Yeah, there are. We keep that quiet. That is cool. They look nice.
Matthew, tell me about you.
I was born in New York, and I left America when I was 8 and moved to sunny Essex, which is where I was brought up. For me, it was quite a sort of suburban lifestyle. And I mean, my family are from all over none of my family are from the same place, so I've got quite a kind of mixed nationalities, I guess, and that's kind of the contrast between me and Ben. When I moved to this country, I was at the age where, I guess where you're at age, 7 years old, where you just want to fit in with people because you're different. And I remember trying incredibly hard to be British. I mean, everyone at my school were all British, and I really stood out. And I remember spending years just kind of wanting to fit in. And then you get to a certain age when you're a teenager, you just want to be completely different to everyone. And I think a common ground that me and Ben have is that both of us, for some bizarre reason, even though our upbringings are so different, sort of ended up kind of researching and reading and studying the kind of same subjects. And I was really fascinated with British culture and a lot of British movements. And Ben was, because he was brought up around that and his parents were part of that. So it's kind of like a common interest, but from very different angles, I guess.
And you said kind of at the start of this interview, you said that you met at art college, but I'd read somewhere else that you met on a bus, which is correct.
Yeah,
but both.
It's both. We were at college and we had a bus trip, but we hadn't met at that point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so it was a college trip.
It's like a 12-hour trip from Bristol to Paris.
Bristol to Paris on a bus.
And we were the only two boys in our class, so we were forced into to share a room together. And
oh wow!
I'd been to Paris a couple of times. You'd never been,
no,
right?
I'd never been.
Yeah. So we did our kind of what we had to do to study, but we also kind of separated and sampled the nightlife.
I see.
Yeah, and that's how we bonded.
Yeah, it was fun.
What did you talk about? Did you talk about music? Was that what kind of?
Yeah, we did actually.
Yeah, music is a big thing.
Yeah, we spoke about music really a lot, and then we also, we just spoke about everything. Well, for 12 hours on the bus.
We had a real, and we still do this, but we have a real fondness wherever we are to really immerse ourselves in the experience and to kind of really go for it. And so when we were in Paris, we kind of didn't do the normal sort of student thing, and we just wanted to kind of experience what the kind of underground nightlife was like in Paris. And
you'd already researched some nights, right? Matt already knew what was going to happen in Paris that weekend, so
that's kind of how
had a look.
that's how we still kind of experience things to this day.
And tell me a little bit, when did the point come where you kind of felt that you would work together? Because I'm aware of how Cottweiler started, and it did feel very organic. You've talked about, not finding clothes that you liked and kind of starting off just making things kind of for yourselves and each other. But was there an immediate desire to work together, or would you say you were very much friends before you were collaborators?
We worked together from the point, almost from the very point that we met each other.
I think from the day we both put our mood boards up in our college and realised that we were both looking at very similar things, we had an immediate attraction to each other and each other's work, so we started from that point on to
helping each other, really, supporting
each other and ask each other's opinion, on our own collections during college,
Yeah, I mean, we both have kind of different strengths and weaknesses, and we both helped each other kind of finish our final collections together. So even then, it was kind of a collaborative thing. And I moved back to London, and Ben moved from Bristol to London. We moved at the same time and lived down the road. And
finding models and stuff. We found these triplets on MySpace, and and then got them, paid for them to come to Bristol for the weekends, and then when we done our final collections, we both knew that we had triplets in the bag, and they were sick as well. They looked good. So
awesome. That's interesting. I want to talk about, you talked about your mood boards, and I want to talk about some of your references, because it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the kind of sportswear thing. Is I think if you make the silhouette that you guys do, I'm not saying you do one silhouette, if you kind of think if you have an immediate aesthetic like you guys, people tend to think that your kind of references are urban and to do with music, and it seems like that's completely not true for you guys. I'm particularly interested in the kind of references to subculture and historical subculture, and was that the kind of things that you started looking at in college?
Yeah, exactly.
It was all documentary photography really to start with, and it's kind of evolved now and has been for the past kind of 5-6 years into Flickr groups.
Almost gone from that to more amateur. Sort of self-produced photography, be it in the fetish world and weird Flickr groups like Matt was saying, or
YouTube as well.
Lots of YouTube stuff. Yeah, but I guess that's just because we've also been researching differently as well. We've been using the internet a lot more than probably when we were at college. When we were at college, it was probably more book-based, and there was more documentation of that, especially with the whole Skinhead thing and Nick and stuff. So.
Yeah, Skinheadism is kind of a big influence. Is that what?
Yeah.
Why? Is it something to do with masculinity, or is it the style? What is it?
I think it's maybe for me, it's the misunderstanding of what it is. I think people find it very, very aggressive and almost a bit sort of scruffy but there's so many sort of hidden codes within it, especially in the clothing, that people don't really know about. So I'm fascinated by the sort of secretness of, the group culture.
Yeah, I think like Ben said, the groups of people is something that we're always really interested in, and something that we kind of research a lot. We tend to become sort of quite obsessive over a particular concept or subject, and so that will tend to involve a group of people, a group of guys normally.
Yeah, and I guess now we've started to kind of build our own sort of Cottweiler groups, that have taken parts of these past cultures, which are what we're translating.
Yeah, I'm interested in the grouping thing, because I think there's a real sense of kind of fetish in your work, and you've talked about this before, I know. But I think there is kind of a focus, I interpret it as a focus on kind of a lot of kind of group fetishes as well, but also there's kind of these strange kind of sexual undertones to it. Totally. And I wonder how deliberate that is, because I know you've done things like look at videos of those weird fetishes where guys are in the shower wearing their tracksuits.
Trainer crushing and shit.
Yeah, it's funny because it really depends on the viewer and how they interpret these things, because in that kind of world there's a lot of blurred lines going on. There's a lot of people who aren't exposed to things like that and would see it in a very different way, not in a fetish way, more in a kind of adoration of a particular item, like trainers, for example. And it's funny when we speak to people who are into what we do and have absolutely no idea that there's any kind of fetish reference involved at all. And we really love that, you know, because we want it to be universal. We want it to mean different things to different people. It means something different to me than it does to Ben. Exactly. And what the final product is a combination of those two things. It's never, we never set out to create something that's sexually provocative in any kind of way. It's kind of more of just an expression of who we are, I guess, and the sort of things that we're interested in and also fascinated by. I think, you know, like I said, this kind of notion of adoring a material object to the point that it becomes fetishized is really fascinating for us.
Well, kind of sportswear as a thing is kind of littered with fetish, as you said. You kind of talked about trainer culture, and it's so, I think the rules and kind of styling details of kind of sportswear silhouettes and styles, it's kind of almost more than tailoring, you know. People who are into it are so obsessive, so there's a kind of two levels of fetish there, I guess.
Definitely.
Are you aware of that kind of obsession of the kind of guy who buys your stuff? Do you find that?
Yeah, I think we're learning that more. For us, we're still kind of getting our heads around the fact that so many people have started to buy it, you know, because it's always been so small for us, you know, and it's now gradually getting bigger. So we're starting to see the guys that really get it, you know, and it's nice that they understand what we're doing, you know.
And appreciate kind of certain details. We like to kind of stay authentic in certain ways. We don't like to create hybrid sportswear, you know. That's not kind of how we see it. So in a lot of finishings and stuff, there's a lot of decisions that go on that before we kind of produce something, because we want it to be authentic. We want those people that we watch on YouTube to see what we do and almost put it in the same category. And at the same time, for someone in the fashion world maybe who hasn't experienced that kind of thing, to look at it from a really kind of fashion point of view.
And I think it's good for us. We want people to really look at the garments, you know. We don't do outlandish prints and adornment, you know. It's very simple. So for us to be able to get close and look at it and really sort of understand the finishing and the fits, and it's important for people to have that relationship with the garment, like going back to the sort of fetish of an object, you know?
I mean, everyone knows, you know, you want to feel good in what you wear, and part of feeling good is feeling attractive and feeling confident. And for a guy, you know, I think for the type of guy that buys our stuff, feeling masculine but not
and
aggressive.
Comfortable as well, you know, like that's why we don't do tweed jackets. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not comfortable to sit in.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about the kind of the comfort and relaxation element of it, and you talked about wanting people to look really closely at the garments. And I wonder, particularly from the fashion press, do you ever find a level of conservatism where, because it is, you know, a tracksuit shape or something, they don't look as closely at the garment?
Yeah, it's easy just to call it sportswear, isn't it? You know?
Exactly.
I think it's just it's easier. It's kind of almost lazy to just say it's sportswear because it's got an elasticated cuff. You know, it's crazy. I don't know how to.
Do you think that's going to have to change though? Because
of course. It has to change. It just has to be spoken about as menswear. I don't see why you have to categorise it, especially now, you know. Like, I can understand tailoring because it's really steeped in tradition, but I think you can start calling stuff performance wear because it performs in a certain way and it's for a purpose. That totally makes sense. And even streetwear is a bit naff as a word. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I think it just is menswear. And then you probably research a little bit more into the fabrication or the cuts, and then you can sort of talk about it deeper instead of just kind of putting it under one name, you know? Yeah,
it's interesting. When I interviewed Nazir for this, I think he gets quite annoyed about it, understandably, and he was like, people look at it and he was like, they don't get it, they don't understand the fabrics that I do, they just look at it and they just say sportswear and they say 90s, and he's like, they don't get the references.
Yeah, he's totally right.
Yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because I feel like, going back to what you were saying right at the start about kind of wanting to really sort of penetrate the fashion system and be kind of working at a big luxury house, I wonder if the kind of designers who get the spotlight on them are ones who work with more conservative garments and more conservative shapes.
Well, yeah, I guess, maybe. I guess it's that old tradition, and you know, but it's going to change. It's changing already. You know, so many more people wear sportswear than tailoring. You know, you just have to stand on a tube to see that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's how different generations interpret things, and I think there's younger generations to us who don't see it like that as well. You know, I think they look at it as menswear, especially the kind of, you know, the sort of kids that buy our stuff and are into sort of fashion, but also into art and into all sorts of other things. I think it just makes sense to them. They don't look at it from the same perspective as maybe even, you know, people that are our age as well, that kind of categorize it as something.
I read in an interview before, you said that, you know, a lot of what you do is kind of inspired by your relationship sort of with each other.
Yeah.
What is your relationship with each other?
Just mates, mate stuff.
Yeah, we're just best mates, and we're just lucky that hasn't changed over the 10 or so years that we've known each other.
Yeah, we're just constantly talking, you know, about the label. That's what we do. It does everybody else's editing, I'm sure, but for me and Matt, it's all, you know, it's everything. So
yeah, our social lives are really important to us. It's really important for us to experience what's going on around us and to be part of that and to be instrumental in that as well. And that is, you know, our relationship, I guess. It's outside of work as well, is that we socialise, and even when we are researching a new topic, we like to experience it ourselves. We like to kind of go through a certain process so that it comes from a more honest place, I guess.
Yeah, there's always something that one of us has experienced, or both of us experience within every concept of every season, you know. And if we have, but we've kind of forgot about it or not really, we need to revisit it, and we go and do it, you know. We go and research it firsthand instead of.
When you say research, do you mean kind of listen to
a
track, go to something?
Go and experience it, you know. Like if we were doing one collection based around holidays, so we added our
convenient.
We're out, ain't we, right, didn't it?
It was kind of this sort of ridiculously kind of
elaborate
sort of kind of trip that we both went on, and we decided that we wanted to do like 21 looks over 7 days, 3 looks a day. Every look was for a specific occasion in this kind of weird sort of holiday destination.
So it's been at the airport, getting on the coach, like what would your outfit be for the coach? So we made sure the tracksuit matched the coach seats, you know, and went right through to the poolside, and then and
we just did it ourselves.
We did it, and we documented the photos, and then worked with Daniel Swan to create a video. That's what we showed at the ICA.
And we've also produced a lot of our own YouTube videos, which are based on a lot of this kind of trainer fetish, I guess. And the shower video is me with my phone at the end of my bathroom. We were like, we've got to make a promo film. We've got to do an invite. We don't want to just pull an image off of the internet. We don't want to just use someone else's imagery. And that's what we've always done, is the same with our Instagram. It's about producing your own work, constantly producing things, and being inspired by things, but also wanting to inspire other people by trying to be as original and honest as possible.
We're getting to the point now, this last season, the season we're about to show, is kind of a good 40% of the mood board is made up by imagery that we've taken, which is a nice feeling. Yeah.
Do you think it helps your clothing be more authentic in a way, because you're not? Because a lot of, you know, it's the kind of fashion cliche. It's like, you know, the journalist goes backstage after the show and goes, oh, so what was the reference? What was it inspired by? And they say some like random artist. And like, it's always very much about referencing someone else. Whereas like, it's interesting that you reference your own self-made stuff. It's quite kind of.
Yeah, we try to. I mean, I think in the early days, we had no outlet to show what we were doing. Neither me or Ben went to a London college. We didn't have any connections with people. So we didn't have that opportunity to graduate and be in the press, and, you know, and we had no money, we had no resources. We were just making stuff in my living room. And when we were making stuff, we would decide to film it and then do like an editorial or do, I don't know, a lookbook
or
that
just
no one would ever
find
see.
Some random location and just go shoot it for the day. But partly is us then sort of just understanding the processes of it. And
it turned into our own image archive. So over all of these years of us just kind of like photographing what we were doing, it kind of just turned into the brand, I guess, into the identity of the brand, and it's really interesting now actually, because we see a lot of imagery that we produced kind of about 5 years ago that's starting to be kind of flown out there onto all sorts of other things, like especially Tumblr is a really big thing. And another interesting thing is, as well as seeing our own imagery being blogged with all sorts of different kind of connotations that aren't to do with fashion at all. That's kind of interesting and quite satisfying for us, that, you know, when you have an image that has no story to it, is literally just an image, where that image ends up. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of just been a process of just producing our own imagery constantly, and then it's got to a point where we produced so much that we're looking back at it and going, oh, like, let's use that for like this season.
Let's revisit that. Let's go back to that. But also as well, it means that, like, ultimately we really like just hanging out and having fun. So it means we can just pick somewhere really random and just get on a train and go there for the day and muck about. Do you know what I mean? Like,
do your other friends think you're a bit weird?
Just what?
Do your other friends think you're a bit weird?
Yeah.
If they were there whilst we were doing it, I think they would.
Yeah, totally. Especially the last one.
But I think our friends know us pretty well. Actually, our friends are quite similar.
We're surrounded by really talented, creative people that also do really weird things.
And they're all really obsessed with just producing original material and you know, kind of all very, very specific about how they want to be portrayed, and that's something that we all have in common. So yeah, maybe outside of our friend group they might think we're a little bit weird, but I think our friends think we're okay.
Good to know. I want to talk about the connotations thing, because it reminded me of something I meant to ask earlier, which is, I think like any work that kind of looks at masculinity and kind of, I guess in a way, like you talked about aggression a little bit before, but also going back to that whole sportswear thing, I think it is kind of fetishized in fashion, particularly in a kind of, it is that fetishization of kind of a working class boy, which you see a lot related to sportswear. Yeah. And that can then become this strange kind of homoerotic element.
Sure.
Do you guys explore that in your work? Do you see people responding to your work in that way?
I think it's, I think this kind of thing about glamorizing working class culture is something that we avoid. I think to some people they probably maybe think that, but actually it's kind of really just going back to us.
It's just ingrained in us, you know, like for whatever reason.
I think, there's certain elements from Ben's background that obviously come through into his creativity and that become part of Cottweiler. I think it's just a normal thing. I think also we like to present things in a very kind of clean sort of, I mean, I'm going to use the word luxury again. I'm not sure if it's the right word, but in a kind of luxury scenario. We don't like to shoot boys up against council flats and concrete walls and that kind of thing. We like to present it in a slightly different way, I hope.
Yeah, and also I think maybe moving a little bit away from focusing on the boy, we've started to look a lot more into sort of, you know, working class interiors, but not in a sort of scummy flat, you know what I mean? We're looking at sort of new build homes, and you know, we're trying to explore what actually it is to just sort of be on a normal level living in Britain, like not in a
I mean, this is another
it's
thing.
familiar. It's just we like the familiarity of stuff. Like.
We often pick up on certain objects that, like, just out of complete coincidence, Ben's mum has in her living room and my mum has in her bathroom, and they're both completely different houses in completely different parts of the country. But it's an object that everyone recognises and understands. Like last season, we used this kind of conch, which is a symbol of
shell.
Symbol of a lot of things to do with the concept that we were researching, but actually, you know, it's the same ceramic conch that my mum has bars of soap in her bathroom.
And those little weird, like, liquid ball things.
Yeah, exactly. So again, like, I think, and also in terms of like defining people by class, I think that's, you know, less important now. I think, and that's why when we pick these sort of objects and environments, it has to translate across a lot of different things. And we enjoy kind of making the mundane look beautiful in some kind of way as well. So I think obviously there's an element of, I guess Ben's working class background, but also a strong element of my middle class background, and that becomes kind of universal in a way.
I think it's just especially with the object thing, is objects that are familiar to everyone, you know, but they've not really thought about them. I think that's something we're really enjoying exploring at the moment.
Yeah,
it's interesting that you talk about objects and settings and situations rather than boys, as you said, because there's such a kind of fetishization of the working class boy.
That's the easy bit, you know. It's easy to go like, that's, you know, a scally lad, let's put a tracksuit on him. But it's actually, how can you make that? What surrounds that? You know, what's the bigger picture?
But there's a real fetish around that as well. I think, you know, for a lot of particularly gay designers or gay image makers, you know, there's something quite sexual about that. You know, it's the thing of like, you fancy the boys that bullied you at school, like being gay. And I think that's. Do you find people sometimes respond to your work as if there is a kind of like homoerotic undertone?
Yeah.
But it just goes back to the person who recognises that, you know? It goes back to that thing.
I like to think that there's a bit more subtlety involved. But I do, of course, know that.
But it's also something we were very conscious of at early stage, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, we sometimes we'd go a bit too far that and then put it back, you know, like, because we didn't want it to just be that as a brand, you know? So it's very, we know it's in the work for sure. Right?
Yeah, we just it needs. I mean, it's interesting as well because a lot of women react to some of the imagery that we produce and work we produce in a similar way to a lot of kind of gay guys would react as well. And I think that's where again the lines are a little bit more blurred. I don't think it can be sort of categorized as being just homoerotic. I think of course it is, but I think it's just also erotic. Kind of erotic all round. It just has. I like to think that it has
just
an appeal.
Really sexy.
just sexy, to some people though, you know.
But there's also a kind of there's the heterosexual side of it as well, where is it about aggression and kind of that, like, you know, all
and
what we were
boys
talking
wanted
about
to look like the other boys and all that. Of course, and that goes back to that sort of group culture. So hopefully it's like full circle.
Yeah. Do you think people understand the work?
I think so. I guess it depends on who really cares what the concept is, or if people just care about what the clothes are. You know, if people only care about walking into a shop and buying the item of clothing, great. They have a different perspective on things. Again, there's certain people that we meet who associate certain things that we've done with things that they've done, and that's really nice as well. It's true. And those are the people that I guess understand the root of where we're coming from.
But then I guess that sort of understanding develops as well, because even just going from seeing it online and then even seeing it in store, then when you actually go to put it on, it changes again. You understand it even more, you know. I think a lot of people probably understand it visually, but not too many. Well, that's going to sort of grow gradually, but not too many understand it by wearing it, you know. And that is ultimately something that we've really focused on, you know, the cut of the garment and how it fits and how it is back to that sort of idea of sportswear, but it's not, it's really considered, you know, it's
how it makes you feel.
And the fit is, you know, it's a bit slimmer, it's not sort of, it's very European, it's not sort of baggy streetwear, it's, so the understanding probably develops, and then even once you've bought it and gone home, you might find a little pocket somewhere, or you might find a detail. So you know, I think
people would understand it less if we hadn't have been working on it for a certain period of time. I think if all of a sudden we just appeared and we just done like a first look book and it was in the press and stuff like this, I think the understanding would be different. But I think people are able to, once they kind of know about it, they're able to kind of look back a little bit and see a bit of a history, and then kind of come to a bit more of an understanding, because it's not kind of just arrived, you know.
It's interesting that you talk about that kind of backlog of imagery that you have, and the kind of sometimes you talk about it in a very aesthetic way, that it's about references and image and, you know, film, what have you. But then kind of going to what you were just saying there, Ben, you also, you know, obviously fabrication and cut is so important. And how do you get that balance right between it being, you know, an excellent garment that someone, as you say, would just want to walk into a shop and buy, but it also being so kind of riddled with references?
Well, I guess a lot of the references come in the lookbooks and the imagery and the presentations and the shows or whatever. I don't know. I think now you just have to That's more, to be honest, this is probably where we balance quite well as well. You know, we're both super creative and we're both, we build the concepts together for sure, but then when it comes to the final twist on the lookbook and the presentation, that's Matt's world, you know?
Yeah.
Mine is the final twist on, actually, let's just move that over half a centimetre, do you know what I mean? Let's make that panel a little bit narrower, you know? So that's where we both have the overall view of everything, but then we both got a little final. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask how you split your work and who
yeah.
does what.
So I do a lot, much more of the pattern cutting and sort of the more hands-on make side of it, and Matt does a lot more of the sort of styling, the overall image, the casting. You know, he's more involved in that. We're both involved equally, but we both have, you know, Matt's more into that and I'm more into that.
And we've had to kind of divide our time a little bit as we become busier. There was a point where both of
We
us
stand
were
over everything.
interlocked over a table for hours on end, cutting patterns together. And Ben's taught me a lot on that side and vice versa.
Yeah, and the same the other way. You
but
know?
we have had to, you know, kind of divide roles a little bit. But as Ben said,
this is what makes it work. That's what keeps us both fully, you know, making sure that it is to a level.
Yeah.
Wherever, but the best we can do at this point, you know.
What do you think you would have done if you hadn't met each other?
I would have been making suits, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Ben was on Savile Row, so perhaps you'd still.
I would have still be there.
Still be
yeah,
there.
Probably in like a three-piece waistcoat suit thing. I don't know.
How long were you on Savile Row for?
Like 5 years.
Did you like it?
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it's cool. I learned a lot, really a lot. Yeah, I think you learn like those finer details and what is actually luxury in and tradition and craftsmanship and stuff. Yeah, of course.
What would you be doing, Matt?
Oh God, I don't know. I think I'd probably be doing something very similar to what I'm doing now. I think it would probably appeal to a slightly different guy. I think obviously because our relationship creates something that is unique to itself. So yeah, I think I would be in a similar world for sure. I mean, I remember being really, really young and wanting to photograph everything, make all the clothes, just create everything myself, and I can't really imagine that changing.
No, but maybe I reckon you'd be a bit more sort of pressy, like more like maybe like you definitely have a magazine, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Or a book, books.
Yeah,
You'd have a book.
yeah.
It's interesting talking kind of about you guys as a pair because, you know, I think there's, as much as there's obviously the amazing kind of creative and artistic side of having someone to sort of, you know, share your ideas with, there's also the kind of pragmatic side of being in a kind of working relationship, given the pace of fashion. You know, it's something that all young designers talk about, you know, how punishing the schedules are and the expectations. And do you find that is part of the reason why it helps to work as a pair, particularly if you enjoy working in a way where you keep an element of mystery? That's really hard now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, especially now as well. You know, when we find ourselves kind of a bit snowed under with production and deliveries and having to do new collections and stuff like that. But having said that, we always work at quite a fast pace anyway. I mean, that whole kind of like 6-month kind of schedule actually suits us really well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we do sort of divide those kind of the sort of, I guess, the chores, the things that aren't necessarily the things that we enjoy that much, but I think between the two of us we're constantly debating things and coming to a final decision.
We're getting to final decisions quick because there's two of us, you know, and I guess the beauty of the relationship is we don't sort of knock each other's opinion, and if the other person's right then the other person's right, you know, we don't argue, we both are very aware when the decision's the right decision, you know.
But yeah, I mean, to sort of answer your question, the pace of things, yeah, it's tough, but it's kind of how we like to work, really.
Yeah, exactly.
We like to kind of be pushed to our limits.
Yeah, we're already like on the next season.
But are you intimidated about the prospect of and more press and more stockists and like, you know, it sounds like if you got offered a job at a house you would take that while keeping the own label? Like, you know.
Yeah, I think it all depends on how strong the team is around you. At the moment, we're very, very small. You know, it's literally me, Matt, and we've got like one part-time employee. You know, and a couple of interns. So I think with that, if it comes to that, then obviously you have to make sure you've got people that can handle stuff when you're not around. You know.
Yeah, and in terms of those kind of decisions, I think we're prepared to wait and to make sure whatever we do is the very best that we can do it. I mean, we've always said from the very beginning that this is about longevity. It's not about a flash in the pan, trend, gimmick or anything like that. It's about doing it for the rest of our lives, and because we have plenty of time left, I hope, it means that we're not in some mad rush to start making decisions and taking on things that we won't be able to perform our best at. So yeah, I think all of these things will come in time, and when the time comes, hopefully we'll be readily prepared for it.
Would you take jobs independently, or would you always, you know, it's interesting, I was thinking about Vetmon and what's happening obviously with Balenciaga, and would one of you go work somewhere else?
I think the strength is that there is two of us, you know, and if they want it because they've discovered the brand, then that is us, you know. So we take it as a pair.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're quite creative as individuals, but we've spent every single day together for a long time, and it's almost hard to imagine what it would be like to create something as an individual, which is
it's true.
Quite weird.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, is there a strange thing with authorship sometimes when you look at something and you can't work out whose it is in some way? You know, is it more of yours?
Absolutely, yeah, all the time. I mean, sometimes when we design a collection, there's like a Ben look and a Matt look, and neither of us would wear it. Neither other of us would wear it.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, this is Ben's.
Yeah, like our characters coming out within.
And talk to me a little bit, we kind of touched on it, but I didn't ask enough about it. Talk to me about the logos thing, because I read that was part of the reason you wanted to start it in the first place, is you didn't want stuff that was covered in branding. And obviously that's a big thing in London, is very heavy logos and branding, and you guys really sit outside of that. Why don't you like logos?
I think it goes back to the longevity, really. I think both of us have wanted the product to be recognisable for different reasons. And those reasons would mean that it would take a little bit more time for things to filter through. But because of that, we feel like it means that there is more of a chance that it will be around for a longer time.
Yeah, and also, I think the main reason was why we sort of used to cover up our logos and stuff was because they were always like in the wrong place, or like, you know, it wasn't right, or it was a funny color, or so if you take that out, then you don't need to, that's something else you don't have to think about when you're wearing the clothes, you know. I think we like to create stuff that you can just wear and have sort of peace of mind and not feel awkward in.
And I think we find it personally more satisfying for something to be recognisable for a cut or a fabrication or an image, rather than a name that's, you know. To be honest, like we are using a little bit of branding now, but it's as subtle as we can possibly do it, but still have a bit of branding, you know. So it's pretty much non-branded, but we definitely had to do a little bit, I think, just so.
When you say had to, is that a buyer pressure?
I think, no, not even that. I think it's just you got your kind of entry-level pieces that maybe require that for someone that can't buy into the more expensive pieces. You know, we don't want to alienate anyone from the brand. We want people to be able to buy, if they like it, they be able to buy something, you know.
Well, having said that, like the branding is always done in a really subtle way.
Yeah, it's always tone on tone.
We sort of did a tape that ran down the sort of trousers and tops, and the branding was actually stitched underneath the tape.
Flip the tape.
And then as you wash the garment over time, it becomes quite threadbare, and eventually you'll be able to see the branding underneath it. So the person hasn't gone in there to buy it because it says Cottweiler all over it, but eventually they'll get a little taste, you know. And even the sort of other branding that we do is all kind of embossed, tonal, really, really subtle.
Why aren't there good sportswear brands for women?
Well, I don't know. There's stuff coming through now. Caitlin's doing alright.
Yeah.
She's coming up.
Caitlin Price,
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm probably the worst person to speak to about women's wear because I not really have a clue. But
You're what?
don't really have. Yeah, I'm not too up on women's wear, but I get the impression there's so much women's wear, you know, and maybe it's more for necessity, you know, like maybe you're going to buy sportswear to go to the gym and not necessarily to wear it because you've got so many other options which you can wear on a day to day. Men have less options in general when it comes to clothing, so I think it's important for a bigger sportswear market to build.
I know you do things for women, but would you move into women's wear as a thing?
We talk about it a lot. I think it would just be what we do sort of slightly adjusted and fit for women's wear. We wouldn't go out to design for a woman.
Yeah, I think we'd find it really
hard
hard.
And not honest, you know, but it goes back to what the brand's about. It's about us and we're not women. It's
been interesting though. I mean, we never really kind of foresaw women wearing our stuff, and Twigs was one of the first people that started just wearing stuff straight off the rail, the men's blocks, and it was really nice for us to see it on a woman's body, for it to kind of mean something else. At the same time, I think the reason why women are interested in it is because it's men's wear.
Yeah.
So I think for us to kind of produce a women's collection would kind of almost go against why women like it.
And in some cases the fabrics are quite feminine as well, so I guess it makes sense for women to want to touch it and wear it.
Yeah.
I'm interested, what do you guys see as kind of success? Like, what would you feel like you'd have made it, or you'd be proud of yourselves if you got to a certain point?
The goalposts are constantly changing. So, you know, we probably have achieved something that we really wanted to achieve a few years ago and haven't even realised it, you know, because we're already looking at the next thing. I don't think either of us will ever be fully satisfied. We're constantly pushing ourselves. So, yeah, it's changed quite a few times.
And like the goals are always quite short term as well. Like, you know, get a bigger studio, and then we get a bigger studio, and we're happy with that, you know. And then, so it's not. I don't know. I guess success is just to keep on being able to do it and do it honestly, right? I think that's a successful label, to get to a point where you've stayed true to what you've believed in from the start. You know, I think when you start to steer away from that, I guess personally you become less successful. It's all about yourself, right?
Yeah, compromising, I guess we don't really like to compromise with anything, so I think it's important for us to just carry on with that mentality, because I think that's the thing that's just going to kind of push us forward. I think if we sat back and said, oh, do you know what, when I was like 15 I wanted to be in this magazine, and now I'm this age and I'm in it, job done, you know. I think it's almost like it's bizarre actually when something like that does happen and we actually sort of go, oh, this is nice, and then like a few days later we're like, oh my god, like that's kind of really important, like so it just keeps changing, and I imagine it always will. And
season upon season, you know, like we want to do a collection every season that when we look at it we're sort of super happy with it, because we weren't so happy with the last one, you know, and that's that sort of short-term success. And then the following season obviously we're going to push it more, and then we're going to stand back and be like, wow, amazing, that's great, you know, that's what we're happy with. Let's push it again, that's the next sort of success.
Thanks very much, guys.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.